Love at First Bite. Part 2. The delegation of 5 ancient vampires arrived at twilight. Each, a century older than Sung Bae, representing a different territory across Asia. They demanded an audience with the vampire boss who had defiled them by taking a human bride, and because vampire law was absolute, Sung Bae couldn't refuse. He would either fight them to protect his woman or die trying. To achieve this, he asked Lilith to stay away. She refused. "This is vampire business," he insisted, his jaw tight with worry. "It could be dangerous. Everything about you is dangerous." Lilith checked her watch. "And I'm not about to let you face whatever this is alone." "Lilith, we're partners, remember? That means sharing the darkness as well as the light." So when the delegation arrived at Park Tower's penthouse conference room, Lilith stood beside Sung Bae, her hand in his, presenting a united front. The eldest vampire, a Chinese woman named Mingyu who claimed to be over 1,000 years old, studied them with eyes like black ice. "So this is the human who's corrupted you," Park Sung Bae. "She's prettier than I expected for someone who's destroyed 3 centuries of reputation." "Choose your next words carefully." Sung Bae's voice was soft but deadly. "I won't tolerate disrespect toward my partner." "Partner?" Another vampire, Japanese and elegant in traditional robes, laughed mockingly. "You mean your food source? Your pet? Don't dress it up in pretty words, youngblood. We all know what humans are to us." Lilith felt Sung Bae's anger through the bond, volcanic and barely controlled. She squeezed his hand, then stepped forward before he could respond. "You're right," she said calmly. "I am human, mortal, breakable, insignificant by your standards. But I'm also the woman who taught a vampire how to feel again. And if that threatens you enough to send a delegation across Asia, then perhaps the problem isn't that he's weak. Perhaps it's that you're afraid." The room went deathly silent. Mingyu's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her ancient eyes. "Afraid? Of what, little human?" "Of irrelevance." Lilith met her gaze steadily. "You've spent centuries building power on fear and violence. But the world is changing. Humans are becoming harder to control, harder to manipulate. And vampires like Sung Bae who've figured out how to adapt, how to integrate, how to build legitimate power. You know they're the future, and that terrifies you." "Insolent," one of the other vampires hissed, lunging forward. Sung Bae moved faster, positioning himself between Lilith and the threat. But it was Mingyu's raised hand that stopped the attack. "Peace, Kenji." The ancient vampire's gaze remained fixed on Lilith. The human speaks with surprising insight. "Tell me, child, what do you propose? That we all follow Park Sung Bae's example? Become tame? Domesticated?" "I propose you evolve," Lilith said. "Humans did. We went from caves to cities, from stone tools to technology. Evolution isn't weakness, it's survival. And vampires who can't evolve will eventually be hunted to extinction by humans who've grown too advanced to fear the dark." The words hung in the air, dangerous and undeniable. Lilith felt Sung Bae's shock through the bond, his pride and fear mixing into something overwhelming. Mingyu studied her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, she smiled. "You're clever. Brave, too, for something so fragile." She turned to Sung Bae. "I came here prepared to issue an ultimatum. Renounce your human ways or be cast out from vampire society. But I find myself curious instead. Show me this new path you've discovered. Prove it works. You have 1 year. And if I can't prove it?" Sung Bae asked. "Then the old ways will reassert themselves, and your territory will be divided among those who remember what it means to be vampire." Mingyu's smile sharpened. "Choose wisely, Park Sung Bae. Evolution or extinction. Let's see which path you're truly walking." The delegation left as silently as they'd arrived, shadows dissipating into the soul night. When they were gone, Sung Bae turned to Lilith, his expression torn between fury and admiration. "You challenged ancient vampires. You, a human, challenged creatures who could kill you with a thought. Someone had to." Lilith's hands trembled now that the adrenaline was fading. "They were going to destroy everything you've built. They might still." He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "God, Lilith, you terrified me. Don't ever do that again." "I can't promise that." She smiled against his lips. "Not if you're planning to keep being dramatic and vampire-y." His laugh was shaky. "Dramatic and vampire-y." "Extremely." He kissed her then, deep and desperate. pouring 300 years of loneliness and 1 year of love into the connection. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I love you," he whispered. "My fierce, impossible, absolutely insane human. I love you so much it hurts." "Good," Lilith whispered back. "Because I love you too. My dramatic, brooding, surprisingly soft vampire. And we're going to prove Mingyu wrong. Together." "Together," he echoed, and through the bond, she felt his hope blaze like sunrise. The year that followed tested them in ways neither expected. Proving that a vampire could maintain power while operating ethically meant constant challenges, constant scrutiny. Other vampires tested Sung Bae's boundaries, looking for weakness. Human authorities grew suspicious of Park Enterprises' rapid reforms, investigating for hidden agendas. But slowly, carefully, they built something unprecedented. Park Enterprises became a model for ethical business, its success proving that profit and principle could coexist. Sung Bae's territory became the safest in Seoul, with crime rates plummeting as he used his resources to address root causes rather than just punishing symptoms. And Lilith's security company partnered with Park Enterprises, creating jobs for immigrants and marginalized communities, building networks of safety and opportunity that strengthened Seoul's entire social fabric. On the night before Mingyu's deadline, Lilith found Sung Bae on the roof of Park Tower, staring at the city they'd worked so hard to protect and transform. "Nervous?" she asked, joining him at the edge. "Terrified." His smile was wry. "What if it's not enough? What if she still sees it as weakness? Then we'll deal with it. Together." Lilith took his hand. "But I think you're underestimating what you've accomplished. You didn't just change your business, Sung Bae. You changed yourself. You proved that vampires can choose who they become. Because of you." "No." She shook her head firmly. "I was the catalyst, maybe. But the choice was yours. The work was yours. The courage to change was yours." He turned to her, moonlight painting his pale features silver. "Do you know what I dream about now? Vampires dream. We do when we have reason to hope for tomorrow." He cupped her face gently. "I dream about centuries from now. You and me, still standing on rooftops, still choosing each other, still building something that matters." Lilith's breath caught. "Is this a proposal?" "Not for marriage. Not yet." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But for immortality. For transformation. For forever." He paused. "I'm asking you to become like me, Lilith. To join me in darkness so we can keep bringing light to it together." The question she'd been avoiding for a year now laid bare between them. "I'm 32 years old," she said slowly. "I've built a company, helped my family thrive, made my mark on this city. I've lived, really lived, as a human. And I think—" She paused, tears streaming down her face. "I think I'm ready to live as something more." Hope blazed across his features. "Are you certain? This isn't something you can undo." "I'm certain." She smiled through her tears. "Because I've learned something this year. Humanity isn't about the body you wear or the blood in your veins. It's about the choices you make. And I choose you. I choose us. I choose to spend forever proving that monsters can be redeemed and humans can be brave." Sung Bae kissed her then, soft and reverent, tasting her tears. "It will hurt. The transformation. 3 days of agony as your body dies and remakes itself. I've survived worse." Lilith pressed closer. "I've survived loving a vampire. Compared to that, everything else is easy." He laughed, the sound rich with joy and love. After Mingyu's judgment, let's finish what we started first. Then we'll begin forever." The next evening, Mingyu returned. This time, she brought the entire Vampire Council, representatives from territories across the globe. They gathered in Park Tower's largest conference room. Ancient creatures studying the changes Sung Bae had wrought with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Sung Bae presented his case methodically. Financial records proving ethical business could be profitable. Crime statistics showing how addressing systemic issues reduced violence more effectively than fear. Testimonials from humans and vampires alike about improved quality of life. But it was Lilith who provided the final argument. She stepped forward, facing the council with the same courage she'd shown a year ago. "You asked for proof that evolution works. Here's your proof. I'm human, and I'm standing before the most powerful vampires in the world, unafraid. Not because I'm foolish, but because Park Sung Bae has shown me that vampires can be more than predators. They can be partners, protectors, leaders who inspire rather than terrorize. She gestured to the windows, where Seoul glittered in the darkness. This city thrives because of what he's built. Humans work alongside vampires, not knowing what they are, but trusting them because trust has been earned. That's the future. That's evolution. And any vampire who can't see that will be left behind when the world moves forward. Silence fell. The council members exchanged glances, communicating in ways Lilith couldn't perceive. Finally, Mingyu stood. We have reached a decision. Lilith felt Sung Bae tense beside her, his hand finding hers beneath the table. Park Sung Bae, you have proven that adaptation is possible. Your territory thrives, your resources have grown, and you have maintained power without the traditional tools of fear and violence. Mingyu's ancient eyes swept across the room. Therefore, the council officially recognizes your methods as valid. Other vampires may choose to follow your example without censure. Relief flooded through Sung Bae, so strong that Lilith gasped at the intensity of it through their bond. But Mingyu wasn't finished. However, we also issue a warning. The moment your territory shows weakness, the moment humans discover what you are and turn against you, this experiment ends. The old ways will return, and those who followed your path will face consequences. Understood, Sung Bae said formally. Mingyu's gaze shifted to Lilith. And you, human, you've shown remarkable courage. Tell me, what do you want as reward for defending our kind? Lilith met her eyes steadily. I want your promise that when I become vampire, I'll be judged on my actions, not my origins. That I'll be respected as Park Sung Bae's equal, not dismissed as his turned human. Shock rippled through the room. Even Mingyu's composure cracked slightly. You wish to be turned? I wish to spend forever changing the world alongside someone I love. If that requires transformation, then yes. I choose it freely. For a long moment, Mingyu studied her. Then, incredibly, she bowed. A slight inclination of her head, but from a 1,000-year-old vampire, it was profound respect. Then you have my promise, Lilith Okonkwo. When you rise as vampire, you will be judged as we judge all our kind, by your strength, your wisdom, and your contributions to our survival. She smiled, sharp and knowing. I suspect you'll prove quite formidable. The council departed, and Lilith found herself surrounded by Sung Bae's embrace, his joy and relief and love flooding through their bond until she couldn't tell where her emotions ended and his began. You did it, she whispered. We did it. We have 3 days before the transformation, he murmured against her hair. What do you want to do with your last days as human? Lilith pulled back, smiling through tears. I want to eat everything I won't be able to taste as vampire. I want to call my family and tell them I love them, even if I can't tell them why. I want to watch one more sunrise, feel warmth one more time. And I want to spend every moment with you, memorizing what it feels like to be human in love with a vampire, so I never forget why we're fighting for this new world. Then that's what we'll do. 3 days later, as Seoul slept under a blanket of stars, Lilith lay in Sung Bae's private quarters, dressed in white, her heart beating its final rhythms. Are you afraid? He asked, his fangs already extended, ready to begin the transformation. Terrified, she admitted. But not of dying, of forgetting, of losing myself. You won't. He kissed her forehead. I'll be here the entire time, holding your hand, reminding you who you are. You're Lilith Okonkwo, the woman who challenged a vampire king and won his heart. The woman who chose courage over safety, love over logic. That doesn't change, no matter what you become. Promise me something. Anything. If I become a monster, if I lose my humanity completely, you'll stop me. You'll do whatever's necessary. His jaw tightened. Lilith. Promise me, Sung Bae. I promise. The words seemed torn from him. But you won't become a monster. I won't let you. She smiled, reaching up to touch his face one final time with warm, human fingers. Then I'm ready. Show me forever. He bit her then, his fangs sinking deep into her neck, and the pain was everything he'd warned and nothing she'd imagined. Fire raced through her veins, burning away everything human, remaking her cell by cell. She screamed, convulsed, died, and was born simultaneously. Through it all, Sung Bae held her. His voice was her anchor, whispering promises and memories and love into the darkness that tried to consume her. You are Lilith. You are strong. You are mine, and I am yours. Come back to me. Come back. 3 days and 3 nights of agony. 3 days and 3 nights of transformation. 3 days and 3 nights of dying to become something new. When she finally opened her eyes, the world had changed. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer. She could hear heartbeats from buildings away, smell blood and life pulsing through Seoul's streets. And the hunger, oh God, the hunger was overwhelming, demanding, all-consuming. Lilith. Sung Bae's voice cut through the chaos. Look at me. Focus on me. She turned and saw him truly for the first time. Not through human eyes that struggled in darkness, but through vampire sight that revealed every detail, every emotion flickering across his face. Love, fear, hope. I'm so hungry, she whispered, her voice strange in her own ears. I know. I have blood prepared, ethical sources, willing donors. You don't have to hunt. You don't have to become what I was. But the hunger pushed at her, demanding, insisting. Every instinct screamed at her to hunt, to feed, to kill. This was what Mingyu had feared. This was the test every new vampire faced. Lilith closed her eyes, reaching deep inside herself for the core of who she was. She found Sung Bae's hand, gripping it like a lifeline. Help me, she breathed. Help me remember. And he did. He fed her carefully, taught her control, reminded her with every word and touch that she was more than hunger, more than instinct. She was Lilith Okonkwo, and she had chosen this transformation not to become a predator, but to become a protector. The first week was hardest. The hunger never truly faded, just became manageable. But with Sung Bae guiding her, with the bond between them stronger than ever, Lilith learned to navigate her new existence. She learned to feed without killing, learned to move through Seoul's shadows without leaving terror in her wake, learned that vampire strength came not from inspiring fear, but from inspiring hope. 1 month after her transformation, Lilith stood on Park Tower's roof with Sung Bae, watching the sun set over Seoul. She'd never see it rise again, never feel its warmth on her skin. But somehow, that sacrifice felt worth it. Any regrets? Sung Bae asked softly. Lilith turned to him. This vampire who'd bitten her in anger and found love instead, who'd learned humanity from her blood and taught her that monsters could choose redemption. Not even one, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her immortal being. He pulled her close, and as Seoul's nightlife awakened below them, as the city they'd sworn to protect hummed with life and possibility, they stood together. Two vampires who'd learned that the greatest power wasn't fear or violence or control. It was choice. The choice to be more than what nature intended. The choice to build rather than destroy. The choice to love even when love seemed impossible. And in that moment, Lilith understood something profound. She hadn't fallen in love with a monster. She'd fallen in love with a man who was learning to be more than the monster he'd been born as. And in turn, she'd become more than the human she'd been born as. Together, they were evolution incarnate. Proof that change was possible, that redemption was real, that love could transcend species, mortality, and every boundary society tried to impose. Come on, she said, tugging his hand. We have work to do. Work, changing the world, remember? One ethical business decision at a time, one immigrant hired, one person shown that monsters aren't always what they seem. Sung Bae's laugh was warm, genuine, fully human despite his vampire nature. Forever is a long time for world changing. Then it's good we're immortal, Lilith countered. We've got nothing but time. And as they descended from the roof, ready to face whatever challenges the Vampire Council, human society, or fate itself threw at them, Lilith realized something else. She'd come to Seoul searching for opportunity. She'd found it, just not in the way she'd expected. 5 years had passed since Lilith Okonkwo became immortal. 5 years since she'd watched her last sunrise as a human. 5 years since she'd chosen an eternity with a vampire over the finite safety of mortality. And in those 5 years, she'd learned something crucial that no one tells you about immortality. Forever is a very long time to keep secrets. The first crack in their perfect world appeared on a Tuesday morning. Lilith was in her office at Park Tower, reviewing security protocols for their newest community center in Itaewon, when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she hadn't seen in 5 years. Her sister, Ada. She almost didn't answer. Vampires didn't maintain close human relationships for exactly this reason. How do you explain why you never age? Why you can't visit during the day? Why your voice sounds different, colder, when you're fighting the constant hunger that pulses beneath your skin? But this was Ada, her baby sister who'd just graduated medical school, thanks to the anonymous donations Lilith had been sending home. Hello? Lilith's voice was carefully controlled, warm enough to sound human, cold enough to maintain distance. Lilith? Ada's voice cracked with emotion. Oh God, Lilith, I need you. It's Mama. She's in the hospital. They're saying she doesn't have much time, and she keeps asking for you. She wants to see you before the end. The words hit Lilith like physical blows. Her mother was dying. The woman who'd raised her, who'd taught her to be strong, who'd sacrificed everything so Lilith could chase her dreams and soul. And Lilith couldn't go to her, couldn't hold her hand in the daylight hospital room, couldn't show her face at the funeral, couldn't even explain why. I'll be there, Lilith heard herself say. I'll find a way. But even as she spoke, she knew it was a lie. How could she go to Lagos? How could she face her family with red-tinted eyes and fangs that descended every time she smelled blood? How could she watch her mother die, knowing she'd chosen immortality over the chance to grow old beside the people she loved? Sung Bae found her on the roof an hour later, staring at the Seoul skyline with tears streaming down her face. Vampire tears, tinged with the faintest hint of red. You heard, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Through their bond, he'd felt everything. Her grief, her rage, her overwhelming sense of having made a terrible mistake. I can't go to her, Lilith whispered. I chose this life, this existence, and now I can't even say goodbye to my own mother. What kind of monster does that make me? The monster who loved you enough to give you forever, Sung Bae said gently. But Lilith, if you need to go, we'll find a way. I'll go with you. We'll make it work. How? She turned to face him, her beautiful features twisted with anguish. How do we make it work? Do I show up at the hospital at midnight? Hope no one notices I don't have a pulse? Do I hold my dying mother's hand with fingers cold as ice and expect her not to notice? Do I watch my family grieve and pretend I'm still one of them when I'm not? When I haven't been for 5 years? Sung Bae pulled her into his arms, and through their bond, Lilith felt his own ancient grief. The centuries of watching loved ones die. The countless funerals he'd attended in shadows. The loneliness that came with outliving everyone you'd ever cared about. This is the price of immortality, he said softly. The price I should have explained better before you chose. But Lilith, you're not just a monster. You're still you. The woman who fights for others. The woman who chose courage over safety. That doesn't change because you can't see the sunrise. But that's exactly what Lilith had been afraid to admit to herself. She had changed. In 5 years, she'd become something other. Something that looked human but wasn't. Something that could tear through flesh with bare hands, move faster than human eyes could track, hear heartbeats from 3 blocks away. She'd learned to feed on ethical blood donations. Yes. She'd learned to control the hunger, mostly. But she'd also learned that the further she got from her humanity, the easier it became to forget why she'd valued it in the first place. I need to tell you something, she said suddenly. Something I've been too afraid to say out loud. Sung Bae pulled back to look at her, his ancient eyes searching her face. What is it? Sometimes, when I'm feeding, I forget that the blood comes from a person. I forget that it used to be someone's life, someone's heartbeat, someone's dreams. It just becomes sustenance. Food. And that terrifies me because if I can forget that, what else will I forget? Will I forget why I loved my mother? Will I forget what it felt like to be human and vulnerable and afraid? The confession hung between them like a blade. This was the secret Lilith had been carrying for 5 years. The slow erosion of her humanity that she'd been too proud to admit. The creeping coldness that made it easier to hunt, easier to kill if necessary, easier to see humans as other instead of as the species she'd once belonged to. Sung Bae was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. I forget too. Every single day, I have to remind myself that the people walking these streets aren't prey, that their lives matter, that their fear and pain and joy are real, even if I can't feel them the way I feel yours through our bond. And do you know what helps me remember? What? You. Your humanity. The way you still cry at sad movies. The way you still send money to your family. The way you still care about people you'll never meet. You're my anchor, Lilith. My reminder that being a monster is a choice, not an inevitability. So if you're losing your humanity, then we fix it together. Starting now. How? Sung Bae smiled. And in that smile, Lilith saw the man he'd been before 300 years of darkness had hardened him. We go to Lagos. We say goodbye to your mother. And we do it properly, even if it's risky, even if it's dangerous, even if it means exposing ourselves. Because that's what humans do. They show up for the people they love, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. 3 days later, Lilith and Sung Bae stood outside a hospital in Lagos, Nigeria. They'd flown commercial, wrapped in heavy clothing despite the heat, sunglasses covering their too bright eyes. They'd timed their arrival for evening, when the harsh African sun had finally set and the world was safe for creatures of the night. And now, standing at the threshold of her mother's hospital room, Lilith felt more afraid than she'd felt in 5 years. Ada was sitting beside the bed, holding their mother's hand. She looked up when Lilith entered, and the shock on her face was immediate. Lilith? Oh my God, you came. But how did you? You look exactly the same. You haven't aged at all. In fact, you look younger, healthier, more beautiful. Lilith supplied, forcing a smile. It's the soul air. Does wonders for the skin. But the joke fell flat because Ada was staring at her with growing suspicion. Sisters know. They see things that strangers miss. And Ada was seeing something wrong, something other, in her sister's two perfect features. Lilith, what happened to you? Ada whispered. Your eyes, they're different. And you're so cold, I can feel it from here. Are you sick? Is that why you haven't come home? Before Lilith could answer, their mother stirred. Even dying, even with tubes and monitors covering her frail body, Chioma Okonkwo's voice was strong. Lilith? My daughter, is that really you? Lilith moved to the bed, taking her mother's hand with fingers that had to be carefully warmed to avoid suspicion. Yes, Mama. I'm here. I'm so sorry it took me so long. Chioma's eyes, clouded with pain and medication, focused on her daughter's face. You've changed, she said simply. You're not the same girl who left for Seoul. What happened to you there, my child? And in that moment, Lilith made a choice. Not the careful, calculated choice of a vampire protecting her secrets, but the desperate, honest choice of a daughter who needed her mother to understand. Mama, I fell in love. With someone dangerous. Someone who changed me in ways I never expected. And I need you to know that everything I've done, every choice I've made, was because I believed it would let me keep protecting you, Ada, everyone I love. Even if it meant becoming something you might not recognize. Chioma studied her daughter for a long moment. Then, impossibly, she smiled. Lilith, I've known you were different from the moment you came into this world. Born during a lunar eclipse, fighting your way into life with more strength than any newborn should have. The elders said you were marked by the spirits, touched by something other. I never knew what they meant until now. She reached up with trembling fingers to touch Lilith's face. But I also know this. Whatever you've become, whatever darkness you've embraced, you're still my daughter. Still the girl who used to dance in the rain. Still the woman who sends money home every month, thinking I don't know it's from you. Still my Lilith. And if you've found love in that darkness, if you found someone who makes eternity worth living, then I'm happy for you. Tears streamed down Lilith's face, red-tinged and impossible to hide. Mama, I'm a monster now. I did something terrible to stay with him forever. I gave up my humanity, my mortality, my chance at a normal life. How can you be happy about that? Because, my darling girl, Chioma's voice was growing weaker now, fading like sunset. Normal was never your destiny. You were always meant for impossible things. And if becoming a monster means you get to love and be loved for centuries instead of decades, then maybe being a monster isn't so terrible after all. Those were the last words Chioma Okonkwo spoke to her daughter. She died 3 hours later, with Lilith holding her hand on one side and Ada on the other. And as her mother's heartbeat faded into silence, Lilith felt something inside her break and remake itself. Her mother had known, had always known, on some level, that Lilith was other. And she'd loved her anyway, had blessed her choice anyway, had given her permission to be the monster she'd become. The funeral was held 4 days later, at dawn. Lilith and Sung Bae watched from a distance, hidden in the shadows of the cemetery trees. Lilith wore a black dress and heavy veil, her body covered from head to toe to protect from the rising sun. She couldn't join the procession, couldn't stand beside her sister as they lowered their mother into the ground, couldn't sing the old hymns or share memories with family members who hadn't seen her in 5 years. But she was there, bearing witness. saying goodbye in the only way a vampire could. As the ceremony ended and mourners began to disperse, Ada broke away from the crowd. She walked straight toward the shadows where Lilith and Sung Bae stood hidden, and Lilith realized her sister knew exactly where to find her. Ada had always been perceptive, had always seen through Lilith's lies. That I need you to tell me the truth, Ada said without preamble. No more stories about soul air or miracle skin treatments. I need you to explain why you don't age, why your skin is cold as ice, why your eyes glow red when the light hits them right, why you're hiding in shadows at our mother's funeral instead of standing with your family. Lilith glanced at Sung Bae. Through their bond, she felt his support, his trust that she would make the right choice. And for the first time in 5 years, Lilith told someone the complete truth. I died, Ada. 5 years ago, I died and was reborn as something other than human. Something that drinks blood and lives forever and can never again see the sunrise. I became a vampire. And this man, Sung Bae, he's the one who turned me. He's the monster I fell in love with. The darkness I chose over everything else. She expected horror. Expected Ada to run screaming or deny what she was hearing or call for help. Instead, her sister simply nodded. I know, she said quietly. I've known something was wrong for years. The way your letters became so formal, so distant. The way you never called during the day. The way the money kept coming, but you never came home. I knew you'd become something else. I just didn't know what. And you're not afraid? Ada laughed, bitter and sad. Lilith, I'm terrified. But I'm also a doctor, remember? I've seen impossible things. I've watched people survive when they should have died. I've seen miracles and curses and everything in between. So if you're telling me vampires are real, that my sister is one of them, then okay. I believe you. The question is, are you happy? Is this life, this existence, what you wanted? Lilith thought about the question carefully. Was she happy? She'd lost her humanity, her warmth, her ability to walk in daylight. She'd watched her mother die from the shadows. She'd become something that frightened children and would never age, never change, never experience the simple joy of growing old. But she'd also found love deeper than ocean trenches. She'd built an empire of protection for the vulnerable. She'd learned that strength came not from fangs and speed, but from choosing compassion even when cruelty was easier. She'd become evolution incarnate. Yes, she said finally. I'm happy. Not every day, not every moment. But overall, I'm happy. I chose this, Ada. I chose him. I chose forever. And I'd choose it again, even knowing what it would cost me. Ada nodded slowly. Then I'm happy for you. Even if I don't understand it. Even if it scares me. You're still my sister. And if you ever need me, if you ever need anything from the human world you left behind, you call me. Promise? I promise. The sisters embraced, one warm and alive, one cold and undead. And in that embrace, Lilith felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She didn't have to hide anymore. Not from everyone. Not from the people who truly loved her. Ada knew, and Ada accepted her anyway. It wasn't the same as having her mother's blessing, but it was close. It was enough. As they flew back to Seoul, Sung Bae took Lilith's hand. Your mother was right, you know. You were always meant for impossible things. And what we've built together, what we're creating in Seoul, that's impossible too. But it's working. We're proving that monsters can choose redemption. That darkness can serve the light. But Lilith was quiet, troubled by something she couldn't quite name. Sung Bae, what happens when we're not enough anymore? What happens when the Vampire Council decides we've pushed too far, changed too much? What happens when humans discover what we are and decide we're too dangerous to exist? We can't hide forever. Eventually, someone will figure it out. And when they do, everything we've built will come crashing down. Then we face it together, Sung Bae said simply. Like we faced everything else. But they didn't have to wait long to find out. The crisis came 3 months after they returned from Lagos. It started with a news report. A body had been found in Gangnam, drained of blood, with puncture wounds on the neck that suggested vampire attack. The report was meant to be sensational, clickbait for conspiracy theorists. But then another body appeared. And another. 5 victims in 2 weeks, all drained completely, all bearing the unmistakable marks of vampire feeding. Someone was hunting in Seoul. And whoever it was, they weren't being careful about hiding their nature. They were sending a message. And that message was clear. Park Sung Bae's experiment in ethical vampirism was a failure. The old ways were returning. Fear was coming back to Seoul streets. The Vampire Council summoned them immediately. Mingyu's face was cold as winter when she appeared on the video call. "You promised us your methods would work," she said without preamble. "You promised us that vampires could maintain power without inspiring terror. But now there are bodies. Human authorities are investigating. Scientists are examining the corpse evidence. And if they discover that vampires are real, that we exist, that we've been living among them for centuries, there will be war. A war we cannot win against 7 billion humans with modern technology. We didn't create these bodies," Sung Bae said firmly. "Someone is sabotaging us. Someone wants our experiment to fail." "Of course they do," Mingyu replied. "There are countless vampires who believe you're a traitor to your own kind, who think your weakness has made us vulnerable. And now one of them is proving their point by hunting recklessly in your territory. So here's your choice. Find the hunter and eliminate them within 1 week, or we eliminate you both and return Seoul to traditional vampire control. Fear, intimidation, absolute secrecy. The old ways." The call ended, leaving Lilith and Sung Bae alone in the conference room. 1 week to save everything they'd built. 1 week to prove that compassion wasn't weakness. 1 week to stop a killer who could be any vampire in Asia. "We start with the pattern," Lilith said, her mind already racing through the evidence. 5 victims in 2 weeks. All found in Gangnam. All killed at night. All drained completely, which suggests the hunter is either very young and reckless, or very old and making a statement. Young vampires lose control when they feed. Old vampires should know better. So which is it? Sung Bae pulled up files on his computer, crime scene photos that his connections in the Seoul police had provided. "Look at the bite marks," he said, pointing to the images. 2 punctures, clean and precise. No tearing, no struggle marks. These victims were compelled before they were fed upon. The hunter made them willing participants in their own deaths. That's not the work of a young vampire. That's the work of someone with centuries of experience. "Someone from the council?" Lilith suggested. "Someone who wants to prove you're a traitor and take over your territory? Possibly, but I think it's worse than that." Sung Bae's face was grim as he pulled up another file. "I've been tracking historical vampire attacks across Asia for the past century. And there's a pattern. Every time a vampire tries to reform, tries to change the old ways, tries to integrate with human society, a series of reckless attacks follows. Bodies appear, fear spreads, and the reformer is eliminated for causing the exposure. It's happened in Tokyo, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Bangkok. The same pattern every single time. You think someone is systematically eliminating reformers?" Lilith's blood ran cold. "Someone who wants to keep vampires in the shadows, maintaining power through fear? I think," Sung Bae said slowly, "that there's someone on the Vampire Council who believes change is weakness. Someone who's been orchestrating these attacks for decades, maybe centuries, to prevent vampires from evolving. And I think that someone has finally come for us." They spent the next 3 days investigating, following leads, interviewing their vampire contacts across Seoul. And slowly, a picture emerged. The hunter wasn't hiding. In fact, they were practically announcing their presence, leaving calling cards at each crime scene. Small objects that only vampires would recognize. A black orchid, the symbol of the traditional vampire clans. A coin stamped with Mingyu's face. A message carved in ancient Chinese characters that translated to, "Evolution is extinction." It was a trap, and they were walking straight into it. On the 4th night, they received a message. An invitation to meet the hunter at an abandoned warehouse in Gangnam. "Come alone. Come at midnight. Come prepared to die like the traitor you are." The message was signed with a name that made Sung Bae's face go pale. Zhao Wei, the enforcer. "Who is Zhao Wei?" Lilith asked, watching her partner's reaction with growing concern. Sung Bae looked older suddenly, more tired, more afraid than she'd ever seen him. "He's Mingyu's personal assassin," he said quietly. "Her enforcer for when council members step out of line. I've heard stories about him for centuries, but I've never met him in person. No one who meets Zhao Wei survives the encounter. He doesn't issue invitations. He doesn't give warnings. He just kills efficiently and disappears. If he's here, if he's the one hunting in Seoul, then this isn't about sabotage. It's an execution." "But we were given a week," Lilith protested. "The council said we had time to find the hunter. Why would they send their assassin while we're still investigating?" "Because they never intended to give us a chance to succeed," Sung Bae said bitterly. This was always about eliminating us. The attacks, the deadline, the investigation, it was all theater. A way to make our deaths look justified. And I walked us right into it. Lilith grabbed his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. Then we don't go alone. We don't walk into this trap like lambs to slaughter. We fight. We plan. We use every advantage we have. You taught me that vampires who evolve survive. So let's evolve our way out of this. They spent the next 6 hours preparing, calling in favors from every contact they had, vampire and human alike, setting up surveillance around the warehouse, arranging backup that could arrive within minutes if things went wrong, and most importantly, feeding. They drank deeply from their ethical blood sources, filling themselves with strength for the battle ahead. Because they both knew this wasn't going to be a conversation. This was going to be war. At midnight, they entered the warehouse. It was enormous, empty except for shadows and the faint smell of old blood. And standing in the center, illuminated by a single skylight, was Zhao Wei. He was smaller than Lilith expected. Slender, elegant, dressed in traditional Chinese robes that looked out of place in modern Seoul. His face was ageless, beautiful in the way that ancient vampires often were. But his eyes were dead. Empty. The eyes of someone who'd killed so many times that death had lost all meaning. Sung Bae, Zhao Wei's voice was soft, almost gentle. You've caused quite a bit of trouble for the council, attempting to change our nature, suggesting that vampires can coexist with humans as equals rather than predators, teaching others that compassion is strength. You've inspired reformers across Asia, and that, my friend, cannot be allowed to continue. Because you're afraid, Lilith said, stepping forward. You're terrified that if vampires evolve, if we learn to live alongside humans peacefully, then assassins like you become obsolete. Your power depends on fear and secrecy, but we're proving that there's another way. Zhao Wei's laugh was like broken glass. You think I'm afraid? Child, I am fear incarnate. I've walked this earth for 2,000 years. I've watched empires rise and fall. I've killed countless vampires who thought they could change our nature. And you know what I've learned? Nature cannot be changed. A predator is always a predator. A monster is always a monster. No matter how much you dress it up in ethics and compassion. Then why do you look so desperate? Sung Bae's voice was calm, controlled. If you truly believed vampires can't change, you wouldn't need to kill every reformer who tries. You wouldn't need to stage these attacks to discredit us. You wouldn't need to work so hard to maintain the status quo. Your desperation proves we're right. Change is possible. Evolution is happening. And you can't stop it by killing us. Zhao Wei's smile faded. Perhaps, but I can certainly delay it by a few more centuries. And right now, that's all the council requires. He moved faster than Lilith could track, crossing the warehouse in an instant. His hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground effortlessly. Starting with your little pet. What happened next lasted exactly 47 seconds, but felt like an eternity. Sung Bae attacked with 3 centuries of combat experience, his movements precise and deadly. But Zhao Wei was older, stronger, faster. He'd been killing vampires since before Rome fell. He knew every technique, every weakness, every trick. And he was winning. Lilith felt her consciousness fading as his grip on her throat tightened. Felt her bones cracking under the pressure. Felt death approaching for the second time in her life. But then she remembered something her mother had said. You were born during a lunar eclipse, marked by the spirits, touched by something other. And she realized that the bite hadn't just made her a vampire. It had awakened something that had always been sleeping inside her. Something that tasted like sunlight. Something that made her blood different from any vampire Zhao Wei had ever encountered. Lilith stopped fighting against his grip. Instead, she grabbed his wrist with both hands and bit down hard. Not to feed, but to inject. Her blood, superheated by rage and desperation and the bond she shared with Sung Bae, flooded into Zhao Wei's ancient veins. And the assassin who'd walked the earth for 2,000 years screamed. It burned. Her blood burned him like acid, like sunlight, like holy water from 1,000 myths. He released her, staggering back, staring at his wrist where her bite mark was glowing with strange golden light. What are you? He gasped. What did you do to me? I'm something new, Lilith said, her voice rough from his attack. Something you've never encountered before. A human who became vampire but kept her light. A darkness that chose to serve the dawn. Your worst nightmare, Zhao Wei. I'm evolution. Zhao Wei tried to attack again. But his movements were sluggish now, weakened by whatever Lilith's blood had done to him. Sung Bae moved in, not to kill, but to restrain. Within seconds, they had the ancient assassin pinned, his arms bound with silver chains that Lilith had prepared earlier. "This isn't over," Zhao Wei hissed. "The council will send others. You can't fight all of us. You can't change 2,000 years of tradition with pretty words and ethical feeding programs." "You're right," a new voice said from the shadows. "One vampire can't change everything alone. But 8 vampires working together? That's a different story." Mingyu stepped into the warehouse, and she wasn't alone. 7 other council members stood behind her, their ancient faces unreadable. Lilith and Sung Bae tensed, preparing for another fight. But Mingyu wasn't approaching with hostility. She was studying Zhao Wei with something that looked almost like satisfaction. "You failed," Mingyu said to her assassin. "I gave you one task. Eliminate the reformers quietly. Make it look like they'd violated our laws. But instead, you got captured by a 5-year-old vampire and her partner. Embarrassing." She turned to Lilith and Sung Bae. "And you two just proved something I needed to know. That your methods actually work. That a vampire who retains compassion isn't weak. That evolution isn't extinction. This was a test?" Sung Bae's voice was dangerous. "You sent your assassin to kill us as a test?" "I sent my former assassin to test your convictions," Mingyu corrected. Zhao Wei believed, as many old vampires do, that change is weakness. That compassion makes us vulnerable. That the old ways are the only ways. I needed to know if he was right. And thanks to you, I have my answer." She looked at the other council members. Evolution wins. The council officially adopts Park Sung Bae's reforms as standard practice for all vampire territories. Ethics over fear. Integration over isolation. Compassion over cruelty. The warehouse erupted in chaos. 3 council members immediately voiced their support. 2 argued vehemently against the change. 2 remained neutral, watching and waiting to see which way the power would shift. And through it all, Zhao Wei screamed threats and curses, his 2,000-year-old worldview crumbling around him. "Take him away," Mingyu ordered. "Zhao Wei will be imprisoned for his crimes against the council's interests. And let it be known that any vampire who hunts recklessly in another's territory, who threatens our secrecy, who attempts to sabotage reform efforts, will face the same punishment. The old ways end tonight." As the council departed with their prisoner, Lilith and Sung Bae stood alone in the warehouse, processing what had just happened. They'd won. Against impossible odds, against ancient prejudice, against an assassin who'd killed for 2 millennia, they'd won. The vampire world was changing. Evolution was happening, and they'd survived to see it. But the victory felt hollow. Because Lilith knew that changing the council's official policy wasn't the same as changing hearts. There would be other Zhao Weis. Other vampires who believed the old ways were better. Other assassins who would come for them in the night. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Over the next 2 years, everything transformed. Vampire territories across Asia began implementing Sung Bae's reforms. Ethical feeding programs. Integration with human society. Businesses that employed both species working side by side, unaware of their differences. Crime rates dropped. Quality of life improved. And slowly, carefully, the vampire world began to heal from centuries of isolation and fear. But for Lilith and Sung Bae, the greatest change was something neither of them expected. It started with a question. A simple, impossible question that Lilith asked one evening as they stood on their favorite rooftop watching Seoul's lights. "Sung Bae, can vampires have children?" The question made him freeze. In 300 years, no one had ever asked him that. "Why?" He asked carefully. "Are you? Is there something you need to tell me?" "No, nothing like that." Lilith's voice was wistful. "I've just been thinking about forever, about what it means to live for centuries. And I realized that immortality without growth is just endless repetition. We don't age, don't change, don't create new life. We're frozen, beautiful and powerful and completely sterile. And I'm wondering if that's really living or just an elaborate form of death." Sung Bae was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that shocked her. "I don't know if vampires can have children. I've never heard of it happening. But I've also never heard of a vampire whose blood tastes like sunlight. I've never heard of a 5-year-old vampire defeating a 2,000-year-old assassin. I've never heard of reformers actually succeeding in changing the vampire world. So maybe, just maybe, there are still surprises left in this existence." Still impossible things waiting to happen. They didn't speak of it again for months. But the question haunted them both. What would it mean if they could create life? If they could bring something new into the world instead of just taking from it? If they could be parents as well as partners? The thought was terrifying and beautiful and completely impossible. Until it wasn't. Lilith first noticed the changes 3 months after that rooftop conversation. She was feeding less, feeling warmer, craving things she hadn't wanted since her human days: sunlight, warmth, growth. Her bond with Sung Bae was changing too, deepening in ways that didn't make sense. She could feel not just his emotions now, but his thoughts, his memories, his ancient knowledge flowing into her consciousness like water finding new channels. And then, impossibly, she felt a third presence, faint and distant and utterly new. A consciousness that was neither hers nor Sung Bae's. Something growing inside her that shouldn't exist. Something that broke every rule of vampire biology. She told Sung Bae on a Tuesday morning. They were in his office, reviewing security footage, when she simply turned to him and said, "I'm pregnant. With a vampire baby. Which should be impossible. But I can feel it. Feel them. Growing inside me. Changing me. Making me something I've never been before." Sung Bae dropped the tablet he'd been holding. "It's not possible," he whispered. "Vampires can't. We don't. Our bodies are dead, frozen, unchanging. Maybe yours is. But mine was human once." Lilith placed her hand over her stomach, where warmth was blooming like sunrise. "My body remembers how to create life. And our bond, the connection between us, it's doing something neither of us expected. It's making new life possible. Life that's part vampire, part human, part something entirely new." They consulted every vampire scholar they could find. Ancient texts, forbidden grimoires, oral histories passed down through millennia. And what they discovered shocked them. It had happened before. Not often, maybe once every 1,000 years, but it had happened. A vampire and a human who'd been turned bonded so deeply that their combined essence could create offspring. Children who were neither fully vampire nor fully human. Daywalkers, light bearers, bridges between two worlds. The Vampire Council convened an emergency meeting. "This changes everything," Mingyu said, her ancient eyes wide with wonder. "If vampires can reproduce, if we can create new life instead of just turning humans, then we're not parasites anymore." However, Lilith looked at Sung Bae, at the man who'd bitten her and loved her and given her forever. Through their bond, she felt his love, his desperate desire to keep her safe, his willingness to sacrifice everything. If it meant saving the child and her life, this alone was what made the pregnancy easy to carry and bear. 9 months passed in a hurry, and they had their first baby vampire, baby Arya, despite the complications. And as the couple looked down at their baby, they smiled in satisfaction that their forbidden love had birthed something beautiful. The end.